The name for a country and the name for its people, technically called denonyms, are in most cases similar to one another. For example, this country is named France and its people are called French. This country is called Japan and its people are called Japanese. And this country is called Colombia and its people are called Colombian. They don't always match up this perfectly, however, like how people from the Netherlands are called Dutch, people from Cambodia are called Khmer, and people from New Zealand, while officially called New Zealanders, are way more known as Kiwis. Yet there's a country name, people name situation that sits somewhere in the middle of all of this. It's a place where the country name and people's name match up fairly well, but there's one difference when you notice it that makes you go, huh, that's weird. This is of course the nation of the Philippines. This Southeast Asian country is composed of way over 70,000 islands and has a population of 114 million people, making it the 12th most populated country in the world. The millions of people born into this nation are referred to as Filipino. This sounds all well and good and is similar to the country's name, but things get odd when you look into how these names are spelled. Philippines, as you can see, starts with a PH, while Filipino starts with just an F. These two starts both make similar sounds to one another, but use completely different letters. It would be like if France started with an F, but French started with a TH or something. Like I said, when you notice it, you realize it's pretty weird. Or maybe you don't. I guess not everyone spends as much time looking at words as I do. But also the language of this land is also known as Filipino, but for today we're just focusing on the name of the country and the people to streamline things. So why exactly is there this weird difference in the spelling of these names? Why does one start with a PH while the other starts with an F if they both make close enough sounds to one another? Wouldn't it make more sense if both names started with just an F or with just a PH so they fit the mold of other country and people name pairings? Well, the best way to figure out this divergence in spelling is by looking into the ultimate history of these words. Philippines and Filipino are clearly related to one another, as they sound alike and do indeed come from the same origin. Once again, the Philippines bucks the wider trend in regards to its name origin. When a country's name and its people's name match up, in most cases it's the people's name that is formed first and then the country is named after the people. For example, Poland's name simply means the land of the Poles, implying that the Poles were named first and then the country after them. With the Philippines, however, it was actually the other way around. The islands were named the Philippines first and then that demonym of Filipino was formed and applied to the people after the matter. Philippines as a name came into being in the mid-16th century. Prior to this, the islands went by multiple different names. Names like Mayi, Mintalang, and Sulu were applied to various islands of the modern nation in the past. So, what exactly happened in the 16th century for these islands to all of a sudden be dubbed the Philippines? Well, the Spanish happened. It was during this century that Spanish explorer Luis Lopez de Villabolos arrived in the land, and shortly they were claimed by the Spanish Empire. They were named the Philippines in honor of the then Spanish prince called Philip, who would later down the line become King Philip II of Spain. With the name for these islands set in stone, the name for their people, Filipino, quickly emerged. Spain ruled the Philippines for a huge amount of time. From 1565 all the way until 1899, it was under Spanish control as the captaincy generals of the Philippines. It's from this Spanish rule that we can start to understand the divergence in the spelling of Philippines and Filipino. The language of Spain, Spanish, has been highly influential in the Philippines, with words of Spanish origin still found in the languages there today, as well as Spanish names being present in the Southeast Asian country too. The tongue still has official status in the land as well. While Spanish migration to the Americas is very well documented, its travels to the other side of the Pacific seemingly go a tad more under the radar. Spanish is a truly interesting language, and while it has many unique features like its rolling R's and accented N, something it doesn't feature is that F-like sound written down with a PH. At least I don't think so anyway. I couldn't find any sources flat out saying they don't use it, but from looking into a variety of English words that featured a PH spelling and their Spanish translations, it seems to be absent. Like phoenix becomes phoenix and graph becomes grafico. I'm sure Spanish people are more than familiar with this PH sound. Like if you showed them it, it probably wouldn't blow their mind. It must appear in loanwords in the language. It just seems that on the whole the language forgoes it altogether in favour of just using an F instead. Though as always, if there's a super obvious Spanish word that does use the PH I'm overlooking, please let me know down in the comments. So if Spanish doesn't use PH in their language, then why on earth did they call these islands the Philippines? Well, they didn't. Philippines is simply the English translation of the name Spain gave them. In Spanish, they were dubbed Las Islas Filipinas, as if you couldn't guess by now, the person they were named after, King Philip II, wasn't even called that in Spanish. The Spanish translation of his name is Felipe. From this original Spanish name for the islands, Filipinas, it makes all the sense in the world why the name for the people of this land will become Filipino. Even to this day, in Spanish, the country and the people are called Filipinas and Filipino respectively, with Filipinas also being the feminine form of that demonym. This means that in Spanish, both the country's name and the people's name start with an F, which is all nice and neat and follows the pattern of most country demonym pairings. Good for them. In fact, this is the case for most other languages' translations of the country name and the people name. In languages like Italian, Bosnian, and when Latinized in Japanese, they both start with an F, while in German and French, both the country name and the people's name start with a PH. Even in the country's native tongue, the first letters match up, with the country being called Filipinas and the people being called Filipino. I guess what's interesting here is that they skip any kind of F sound entirely and just go with a P. What this shows us is that across the globe, the different starting letters of the name of the country and the demonym isn't an issue because they do in fact match up. This divergence isn't a problem with the nation itself, nor the languages spoken there. This is solely an English problem, but also English is widely spoken there too, so I guess it is kind of their problem, but, well, you know what I mean. For some reason, when the English language got its mitts on these names, it decided to not keep things nice and neat. The country's name was translated to start with a PH, while the demonym was left as it was in Spanish, starts with an F. English really did decide to buck the trend here and leave this pair of words not starting the same way, while the majority of the world's languages actually kept them the same. So why exactly did English end up using a PH for one word and an F for another? Well, we aren't entirely sure. There's seemingly no one defining moment when it was decided that this would be the case, and there's no one single answer for all of this. It seems to have just always been that way in English. I checked both these words in the Oxford English Dictionary, and the earliest use of Filipino in English has it starting with an F. And while Philippines isn't in the OED because place names aren't, it's a whole thing, Philippine as an adjective is in there, and we see in its earliest usage it was being spelt with a PH. This is seemingly just how English decided to go about doing things. While we may lack one true answer in uncovering this one, we can certainly hypothesize on why this happened based on other factors relating to the English language. With all of this in mind, I have a few theories of my own. One theory all boils down to that human first name the country is named after. Philip. This is a name that has been present in both English and Spanish for a very long time. The UK had a Prince Philip for like ages until a few years back. What this means is that the name is super ingrained into the language, and English speakers would readily know that the Spanish name of Felipe translates into Philip. So when an entire country being named after that Spanish name of Felipe, the English language could easily translate it as they were familiar with adapting this name, allowing Filipinas to easily become Philippines in English. The Anglo tongue, meanwhile, wouldn't have been as easily able to adapt Philip into a demonym. I guess it could become something like Philippian or Philippines, but these don't really roll off the tongue as well as Filipino does. So unable to translate this demonym, they just stuck with it. It's not a perfect theory, but it's one that kind of makes sense to me. My other theory is that English speakers, when these words were being formed, simply didn't have all that much to do with the specific people of the land. The Spanish name for these islands came into being in the 16th century. This was a time when global communication wasn't as easy as it is today. When English speakers dealt with these islands, it probably wasn't in relation to the natives of the land. It was probably more in relation to the islands themselves and what the Spanish rulers were doing there. With this idea in mind, it would make logical sense that English would go out their way to translate Filipinas into that proper English word of the Philippines, but simply just borrow the Spanish Filipino for the people of the land. Once again, that's just my theory. My final theory is the one I believe the most, however, and that's the idea that English is just a very silly language at times. English has always marched to the beat of its own drum. While other languages use clever rules and actual logic behind the formation of their words, English just kind of does its own thing. We see this in the many silent letters of the language, the many weird spellings of British English, and the complete lack of things like accent marks, which allows two words with different pronunciations and meanings to be spelt in the exact same way. Seriously, never underestimate the English language's ability to be utterly nonsensical. These are just my three ideas, but in reality it could be none of these or something else entirely. While we might not know why exactly, what we know for sure is that Filipino starts with a PH, but Filipino starts with an F, all because of the English language being, as always, awkward, difficult, and silly. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/Name Explain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm Name Explain YT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.